There are two tales waiting for you, told one after the other by an odd set of two. So prepare yourself, dear one, because this is Drops of Darkness.
Hello, and welcome to the show. I'm Cameron Helkuik, voice of someone, and collector of our true stories. This week is going to be a little different. You usually hear a fiction story written by my co-producer, Anodyne. Unfortunately, Anodyne's creative focus has been pulled elsewhere this week. We didn't want to leave you hanging, so we decided to give you not one, but two true stories. We hope to be back on our normal schedule next week, but if not, don't worry. I'll be back with some more true stories to ensure that you have a little bit of reprieve from your daily horrors. Okay, enough of all that. Someone is waiting. I am someone, and I tell only truth. I am a collector, woven from nightmares and memories hidden deep in your mind. Whenever something slithers through the barrier between worlds, I am there, not to stop them, but to watch them and remind you of the countless terrors your kind has survived, all on their own. This story was submitted by a friend of Hannah Hart, who experienced this encounter. This happened to my friend back in 2007. We're adults now, and this happened to her when she was 16. To this day, she describes what she saw the exact same as she had right after it happened, and can still clearly picture it. She was walking home from her friend's house at night in a town in southern Oregon. She doesn't remember the exact time, but says it was definitely after midnight and it was dark and no one else was out. She says she was completely sober and not sleep deprived. So she's on her way home, and just about 2 blocks from her house, she was walking on the sidewalk along the main street and was crossing between 5th and 6th Street. Her house is on 7th. Across the street is a Safeway and a cemetery. Right then, she noticed something about 50 feet ahead of her crossing the street from the cemetery side to the side she was on. This is how she describes it. There were 2 creature things walking on their hind legs side by side. One was slightly shorter than the other, but they were both really tall, at least 7 feet. They were hunched over, lanky, and extremely skinny. She says her immediate first thought was that they looked almost like deer walking on their hind legs, but they didn't have any fur. It was more like a dark grayish skin. They held their arms and wrists kind of like how a T-Rex would, but their arms and hands were very long, almost as long as their legs. When I asked, she said she didn't see any tails. I asked her if they have hooves, and she says she thinks so, but can't remember that part for certain. Everything was quiet, and she didn't hear them making any sounds on the pavement as they walked. I asked if they have antlers or deer-like shaped faces, me thinking that maybe it actually was just hairless deer walking on their hind legs for some reason. She said no antlers, and their heads were not shaped like a deer or any animal, but more like a person's. She describes their faces as looking human with human features, but something was slightly off. She had frozen where she was as soon as she saw them. Everything was quiet, and there were no cars driving by or anyone else around, which is normal at night in our small town. She says she stood there kind of in shock. She said she watched as the 2 creatures slowly walked side by side, silently, from across the street and over to the side of the street she was on. She says they didn't seem to see her at all. Or if they did notice her, they didn't act like they did. She says they acted as if they were simply a couple going on a casual night stroll together. She doesn't remember feeling any negative energy or vibes. She just felt fear because she was pretty damn scared. As soon as they finished crossing the street, they continued straight down 6th Street, and she couldn't see them after they passed the first house. At that point, she said she snapped out of the shock and started running the 1 block towards 6th Street to see where they were going. Once there, she turned down 6th Street to follow them, but they were completely gone. She doesn't know where they could have possibly gone that fast, considering they were just walking. And not walking fast, but like I said, almost as if the 2 of them were just out on a casual night stroll. As soon as she realized they had somehow disappeared out of nowhere, she started running as fast as she could the last block to her house on 7th Street. She told her mom and sister the next morning. She says these creatures were like nothing she's ever seen or heard of before. The closest thing she can compare it to is the werewolf that Professor Lupin changes into in the Harry Potter movies. Hairless, super lanky, and hunched over strangely. Except these ones had more human-like faces and heads than a wolf. She only ever told her family and a few friends, me being one of them. Whenever I ask her about it, she describes it the exact same way and is still pretty shook up when she thinks about it. Nothing like that has happened to her before or since. Hello, everyone. In between stories, we like to highlight a cause that is worth our collective attention. It's Pride Month, and we want to give a huge shout out to Lambda Legal, an incredible nonprofit that has been fighting for the civil rights of LGBTQ plus individuals and everyone living with HIV for over 40 years. From landmark court cases to advocating for policy changes, Lambda Legal is on the front lines ensuring equality and justice for all. You can find out more and donate at www.lambdalegal.org or from the link on our website at dropsofdarkness.com. Now, back into the shadows we go. This story was submitted by AmpPlayer423, whose Reddit handle is listed in the episode's description. I was 14 at the time. I lived at home with my parents and my 10-year-old sister in a normal suburban house in Connecticut. I had always believed in ghosts, but I never had any experience with anything and never wanted to. My mom has always been infatuated, loves ghost stories and paranormal TV, finds it fascinating and is always open to it. 6 months prior to this event, my aunt, my mom's sister, was diagnosed with melanoma. It was terminal, and treatment did almost nothing as the disease progressed. It was really a waiting game to see when, not if, the treatment stopped working. Towards the end of her treatment, I distinctly remember a heaviness in the house. Whether it was my mom's sadness or maybe just a feeling, but being home just felt dark. For context, it's important to know the layout of my upstairs. My house was a standard 2-story, 4-bedroom home. My room was directly next to the staircase, with my parents' and sister's rooms being on the other end of the house, right next to each other. My house was old-ish, not like haunted old, but maybe 30, 35 years. The floors upstairs would creak if you walked on them. My sister and I knew it all too well when we would sneak around at night to get snacks and my father would catch us. One night, before my aunt's passing, I'm laying in bed with the door open to my room. The hall nightlight dimly lit the area, just enough so as it wasn't pitch black. As I'm laying there, I distinctly remember this gut-wrenching feeling of a heavy energy and uneasiness in the house. As I'm laying there, all of a sudden, I hear this horrific running, heavy footsteps from my parents' room. Down the hallway and then down the stairs. Fast, heavy footsteps. I sat up immediately and just listened. The footsteps went down the stairs fast as hell, the heaviness being the scariest part. Think of a big man in work boots going downstairs as if their life depended on it. Next thing I knew was the light turning on and my father hauling ass down the stairs. I could hear him searching the house. All the while, my mom's at the top of the stairs looking down. I asked, "What's going on?" And she asked me, "Were you out of bed?" To which I said no. My dad came back up and asked me the same thing. We checked on my sister, who was sound asleep, and then double-checked again that nobody was here. My mom ended it with a, "Just stay in bed for the night," and left it at that. Nothing more. I remember being scared more than I ever had been before. It was my first unexplained encounter. My mom told me it might have been something coming to visit before taking her aunt home, but I don't know how I feel about that. But either way, those footsteps still remain in my memory forever.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Drops of Darkness, which is written, voiced, and produced by Anodyne Vaughn and Cameron Helkuik. If you enjoyed your drift into the shadows, help keep the stories alive by sharing the show, leaving a review, and if you really want to earn the favor of these dark storytellers, tether yourself to their world by tapping subscribe. If you have a true paranormal story of your own that you'd like to be read by someone, you can make the offering to submissions@dropsofdarkness.com or through the form on our website. Until next time, dear one, and remember, when the darkness looks your way, hold its gaze.